What is up, grinders? Welcome to an MMA crunch time before lock here on a beautiful UFC VETTORI Cannoneer. I am your host, Mike Brown, aka H3 Buddha, here with my pal, Blender HG, Jordan Cooper. How's it going, buddy? I mean, we had 14 fights, 13 fights, 12 fights.
Not a beautiful card anymore, Mike. It's not a beautiful card. It would have been beautiful at 14.
Okay, so they get Zalgas another fight, and they say, "Oh, we'll do it next week." What's up with this?
I want that fight to fade. Who doesn't want to fade a Zalgas Magulov fight? I want more ownership on that. I hope people roster him today. Right? I want that. So, like I hate when the fights that I want other people to play are canceled.
I mean, there are some very obvious spots on this slate, and the main event, I'm going to be honest.
But are they?
I'll kick it off with my thoughts in a second, but the main event itself is like, that could be crappy scoring over 5 rounds. And with the less fights, it's like, shit, I'm going to have to play it.
That's no, I don't think that's. I don't think this is this you must play level. Nothing's must play, but
no.
I mean, I think it's much more viable to fade Cannonier than VETTORI. I think Cannonier's path to a lot of points is basically a round 1 or round 2 knockout, and VETTORI has never even been knocked down in his career. So yeah, Cannonier has power; he could do that, and VETTORI, theoretical wrestling upside. But a lot of times he just chooses not to use it, and Cannonier actually has good takedown defense and gets back up. I mean, I think it's more likely that in a decision, VETTORI puts up enough to be in the optimal than Cannonier does. Yeah. But it's a mid-priced fight, so, I mean, it makes it a little bit more viable to play. But the spreads of the fights are close. I mean, it's a 12-fight card, mid-sized. Outside of one fight, everything else is competitive, right? Outside of the Sarukian fight. I mean, Alessandro Costa's minus 276. And, I mean, mostly it's 2-to-1s if at best. So, I mean, you could leave money on the table. That everyone's viable. There's plenty of these fighters are untrustworthy or under, like, a handful of fights in the UFC. So, I think a lot of people are going to judge based on, like, a sample size of 4 minutes and 12 minutes on, how the fight's going to play out. And I think the edge here is the ownership's going to be condensed on certain people, and people think they know based on small sample sizes, and take your shot with the ownership leverage.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you about the Zarukian side of things in a minute here, because that's the, 60, it's saying 50%, probably going to be auto.
I have him at 50. I have him at 58%.
Yeah, I figured it'd be closer to 60 than it would be 50, but this is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can sign up for FanDuel Sportsbook if you're in a legal sports betting state. Take advantage of their awesome bonus offer. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500 in bonus bets. Terms and conditions do apply. I will say, live spots, again, we're getting a lot of spots where you have fighters that are probably more prone to getting finished in the first round on this slate. I'd say there's a lot of first-round equity, but fighters can take over late. Some veterans, the Argetta fight in particular, Ronnie Lawrence hasn't looked great deeper in fights as they go. But let's start off with that Zarukian. I think it's really the elephant in the room, at least for lineup builds, right? $9,800, $300 more expensive than any other fighter on this slate, Blender. And below him, I mean, I'm going from Sabatini, Salikov, Costa, Bleda. Those are my people, but Zarukian's just too good. I mean, he's not your prototypical Bo Nickel, right? Bo Nickel was going in there for a takedown, and he was, I think the last fighter that was comparative in price, right, was probably Bo Nickel, but he wasn't getting significant strikes at a high rate either. He's not one of those pitter-patter guys. He's not going to just shoot a takedown, get a knockdown, then get on top and pitter-patter. He's going to look for a submission, probably pure takedowns. Zarukian is the safest play on the slate by a mile. My problem is there's just so much ownership there, Blender. And you got Ugly's Women's MMA and Bleda right there, a high-action Costa, Salikov. You and I probably can agree he's so slow-paced. He's going to rely on that first round like always. And then The real fight that I can't wait to say and is almost a lock is the Sabatini Almeida. I don't know how that fight busts, but I know there's a lot to digest there. But how are you handling?
No, I would say another. I think I'm another fight is I would put in that category. I don't think.
Mata,
Yeah, the Torres Mata fight. Yeah, definitely. I mean, Torres he's gone to the second round once in 15 fights. So I mean,
those are the two fights. The Sabatini,
right. But the
Almeida.
Sabatini. See, the thing about the Sabatini Almeida fight is that it could be. I'm going to use your example that you give. You think in these ways of Sabatini takes down Almeida, doesn't finish him in the first round, and then Almeida knocks him out in the second round. Almeida barely scores any points in the first round, and I could see the same thing with the Lawrence Argueta fight. I mean, Lawrence, when he's done well, has been against one-dimensional strikers, and Dan Argueta, I don't think is a great fighter, but he's a grappler. So this could be one of those, it stalls out, or one person gets one round, one person gets another round, and the fight could bust that way. I mean, you could say that for a lot. I mean, there are fights that are more clear bust candidates than others. But the variance on the slate is going to be very high. These are fighters. Most of this is low level, right? Most of this is mid-level to low level at best. Half these fighters probably shouldn't even be in the UFC. So depending on the day, how they woke up and the weight cut and who the hell knows, people that have been away for a year, what have they been doing? I mean, we really don't have as people think they know, but I'm going to go away from the I think I know this. I mean, Sarukian, the key with Sarukian, I don't think is he going to win. He's minus 1,000. He's minus 400 inside the distance, minus 105 to win in the first round. More than 10, yes, about 9% of the time he loses, and then about 3% of the time from that, it's because Joaquin Silva scored 100 points. I mean, it really comes down to me. Realistically, not does Sarukian win, but how many points does he put up? And does he put up enough for 9,800? Based on my calculations in my little worksheet, my little model, when someone's a minus 1,000 favorite, minus 400 inside the distance, and minus 105 inside the first round, and he grapples, truthfully, it sounds weird to say, 58% ownership, I have him as under-owned.
Wow. I mean, what's the realistic? I mean, you went through your system. Is it 105? I mean,
no,
I know
120, 125. I mean,
you want a ceiling.
Sarukian could score 120 plus points just in the first round without a quick win bonus, right? Takes him down once, twice, ground and pound, goes for a submission, doesn't get it, ground and pound TKO finish from top mount with 40 seconds left in the round. Dude, that could easily be 115, 120, 125 points. And if he doesn't get it, it's not like the fight is going to be 15 minutes on the feet. Even in a decision, God knows how many points that Sarukian could score then. I mean, maybe he scores more points. So it really comes down to lineup construction. You're going to be playing a $9,800 priced fighter at nearly 60% ownership. You shouldn't be playing these Sarukian, Torres, Lawrence, Vettori lineups. That's the thing. You know me, it's not about players, it's about lineups. Lineups, not players. So if you're building lineups that don't have Sarukian, then you don't mind the other fighter combinations. But if you're playing Sarukian, you want to build a different way.
Sarukian, what is it? Vettori and Bondar. That's your first 3 clicks for a lot of people because
right, and then you tell either one of Torres or Lawrence or that's what most of these lines are going to look like. A lot of people are going to play Almeida as an underdog, right? We look down at the bottom range
because exactly what you said. That can be the fight where, of course, Almeida could get a zillion significant strikes and make us look like an idiot, right? Over 3 rounds, or he gets stalled out for a round, completely stalled out, and then he scores 70 points in a win. He almost hits 10x on his salary. But it's
Lucas Almeida's path to 100 points is much more finish dependent than anything else because he's really. I mean, I don't see him grappling with Pat Sabatini. He's going to stay away from him because Sabatini. Sabatini is 9,100, but I mean, Sabatini could get knocked out. But I mean.
There's a fight
if he gets your back, if he gets you on the ground, I mean, Sabatini is going to have a massive advantage over Almeida.
I agree. I'm pretty sure Almeida has not been submitted in the past, which is one of those things, jiu-jitsu from Brazil as well. So that's a little bit of an issue. But this is a spot where I could see multiple takedowns too. Like it's crazy that Sabatini could literally get like 40 points in a loss. Not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying he could have like a decent floor, which is nuts. But we're looking for ceilings here, and there's a fight that starts off the night that is so ugly and so disturbing that you and I know how it ends. There's some bull crap double knockdown, like something happens where it scores a zillion points. But here's what should happen, Blender, and you and I know this. Both guys stalling techniques. Modestas Bukakas versus Zach Pauga, right? These two guys like to clinch. Pauga got into MMA at 30. I didn't even realize that. Like this guy went to a decision with Jordan Wright. Blender, you could beat Jordan Wright inside the distance. I'm pretty sure you could.
I probably wouldn't last 30 seconds, but whatever. If you say so.
Just survive 30 seconds. That's all you need to do.
I don't even want to try surviving 30 seconds. I'm not getting in there.
But then Majestas is like one of the worst point per dollar scorer in history. He just doesn't do anything. He clinches. He goes against the cage. He does score. He does have a knockout win, but that was one of the weirdest ones ever where he knocked a guy down at the end of the round. Guy got up and fell out of the cage. So they were like, okay, it's over. So it's
I remember that because I had the other guy.
Yeah, exactly. And he was supposed to grapple. So it's like, there's not a lot to be had in that one, but the low ownership, man. I don't know if I've ever seen a fight that is both guys about 15% owned expected. And listen, I'm more likely to use Modestas than Pauga, but anything's possible. Well, for me,
I think Pauga has, at 7,200, he has more paths to being optimal than Bukauskas at 9,000. Bukauskas is round one dependent. The two fights that are very similar, I much prefer one over the other. You mentioned Bukauskas versus Pauga. I prefer the similar ownership is the Salikov-Dalby fight because I think Salikov has, much more. Dalby's much more durable, but I think Salikov is way more of a knockout threat than Bukauskas is. So, Salikov he's plus 150 inside the distance versus Bukauskas, which is plus 180. He's $200 more. He may even be a little bit lower owned than that. So, from an ownership perspective, the reason you're playing those two fights is because of ownership, not because the two fight. It's not one of those things where one fighter fights in a way where it slows down the fight. It's both of them. Like Dalby doesn't do anything either. I think Dalby does less than Pauga, right? Because Dalby doesn't do anything either. He doesn't grapple. He's plus 600 inside the distance. He's totally dependent on a knockout, but at least he's 7,000, right? I think I'd much rather.
That's an interesting fight, though, right? Like Dalby could have more volume over 3 rounds. I know you're looking for finishes. I know Salikov more likely to hurt him over the first 2 rounds and get some respect. And I think there's sneaky grappling for Salikov if he wants it. But it's going to be rinse repeat. It's going to be take Dalby down, Dalby gets back up. That's the type in that fight that's sneaky. But
I want to address a comment. Hold on. I want to address a comment in the chat by Danny Coffey. How can any 9.8K fighter in a 3-round fight be optimal at a 70+% clip? Like it'll be owned in single entry. I might even say 70+% clip. You don't have to be optimal in single entry tournaments. Just remember that. Like for large field contests, if you're playing the main GPP with 31,000 entries, the lineup that wins is going to be as close to the nut lineup as possible. So as far as him being optimal, Sarukian has much less chance of being optimal than just simply being in the winning lineup of a 200-person contest in small field. So even in small field, let's say Sarukian is 72% owned in small field. It's quite possible that he has a 76% chance of being in the winning lineup simply because you don't need the nut lineup. Just if you got 110 points from Sarukian and the nut lineup didn't really need him, right? Because some other guys in some weird combination, dude, you could still win. I've won the 555 with what was the 16th nut lineup, the 16th best possible lineup. That was all that, and all the other lineups were played. So it's not like oh, this weird thing and whatever. No, if you went to the large field contest, there were literally 15 other lineups that were entered that were above my lineup, but in the 555, mine was the highest line. That was a card where I had a losing fighter in this, and the losing fighter didn't. I mean, you understand what I'm talking about? That like in smaller field contests, yes, the ownership gets more condensed, right? Sarukian maybe less and less under-owned, the more obviously he gets owned. But you don't need to not line up in small field contests.
The contests, the context of this slate, there's a lot of live dogs. There's dogs that have ceilings. There's you got a lot of different variables to get to Zarukian. We're not talking about a slate where the pricing is so tight that you're going to have to take some risk down below. Maybe on a ugly women's MMA.
I love that. Dude, Mike,
it's gold. It is. That fight's gold.
I have a lot of Gabriela Fernandez.
It's terrifying. Did you see the size difference? I don't know if you saw the weigh-ins. I don't know if you watch them anymore.
No, I know. And I know that Gabriela Fernandez got smothered by Jasmine Jasudavicius and Teresa. But Teresa Bleda, like, these are not good fighters, right? Like, actually, Gabriela Fernandez has way more experience than Teresa Bleda. Teresa Bleda has almost like I got someone from your bar could strike better than Teresa Bleda.
Yeah.
And basically she's got size. Like that's essentially it. It's not like much technique or anything. And I understand in women's MMA, especially, typically physicality does win. I get it. But Bleda also has no cardio. So like, I mean, she lost her last fight to Natalia Silva because of cardio. I mean, she won the first round. She was winning and then died.
She doesn't wear damage well. People don't really look at that thing either. I mean, she's got a pale. She might be more fair-skinned than you and I, and that's saying a lot. So, like, when she's getting hit, she's going to show a lot more damage, too. Optics mean a lot, too, for win equity, unfortunately.
And at 6,700, I mean, it's quite possible that Gabriela Fernandez putting up 76 points could be, I mean, you could
volume-based.
And Sarukian putting up 120, that means that there you go. Yep. But it's low-level women's MMA. So also understand the fact that this could look like it should have been lined at minus 600 on either side at any time, right? Bleda could come in and just take her down and kill her for 3 rounds and score 127 points. It can happen. Gabriela Fernandez could survive the first 2 minutes and then end up knocking Teresa Bleda out. I mean, it could be that, but I think a lot of people are looking at Fernandez's last fight, which is the only fight they know of, where Jasmine smothered her. Didn't finish her because
she was
Jasmine
the favorite.
Not much of a finish.
Fernandez, I'm pretty sure, was the favorite. I might have to look back at that.
Jasmine was I believe was the favorite. But and they're gonna go, oh, horrible takedown defense. Oh, okay. But I mean, Jasudavicius is actually a much more credentialed wrestler than Teresa Bleda is. Teresa Bleda is just a big girl, right?
Yep.
That doesn't mean just understand that she's a big girl. She could take her down 18 times. I mean, like it could happen. But I think more people are siding with either fading the fight at Blade at 9,500 going, I am playing a women's MMA favorite with a plus 210 inside the distance. So she's going to be low owned. And I think Gabriela Fernandez at 6,700 is going to be pretty low owned. Maybe not in the single digits, but maybe in the low teens. I have her at 13%. I don't mind taking. I think from a win equity perspective, I think she doesn't.
You could do worse.
That bad of a shot to winning the fight.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about 2 fights that we haven't talked about that I kind of put in the same category, and then I'm going to switch to the 2 value plays in the slate. Okay, Blender. So we got Christian Quinones versus Kung Ho Kang, and we have the Leroy Duncan and Petrosian. Those 2 fights I put in the same category because they're somewhat near each other. I know you get the thumbs down, but I'm thinking to myself, is Duncan kind of the X factor? I mean, at 8,600, if he hits 105 points, he's kind of like one of those guys that can get you to the promised land. And Quinones, I expect to be lowest of all these fighters up, middle to up.
I have him as overowned, Mike. I still have him I have Quinones at 23% projected owned. I have him as the most overowned favorite on the slate.
Here's the problem. I don't know if you know Mr. Perfect, Kung Ho Kang. This guy does not fight smart. He should go for takedowns when he's got the advantage there, and he kickboxes, and somehow he wins against the kickboxer. Then he'll go in against a grappler, and go and grapple with him. It doesn't make any sense. So, and he's at the tail end of his career. So I really should have tagged him, I think. The more and more I've gotten deeper into the week, because it's like he at 7,400 is probably more of a play, but I still think Quinones has that power that could take out the old guy. That's my problem in that fight.
35 inside the distance. So, I mean, the market doesn't necessarily agree that much.
They don't agree, but it's because King has been durable. He's now like 36 or something. He's older, and it's like the UFC knows what they're doing. Look at all these cuts that they've had lately, right? King's probably on like a higher paid thing. They're like, all right,
maybe he's fighting for his job. He'll fight harder, Mike.
Okay, all right.
I don't like. I mean, out of the 4 fighters you mentioned, I prefer Christian Leroy Duncan. People are going to be a little bit. They're going to see his last fight. The last fight he won against Todorovic. Todorovic injured his leg, so it's like he didn't like finish it. But if you saw the beginning of that fight, right, he's like, okay, I'm going to take Christian Leroy Duncan in this fight. Of course, I had Todorovic there. I've been on a really bad run. Getting some of them, I would get like mostly good, except for like 2 fighters, and then like all my lineups are garbage. I think Christian Leroy Duncan will be lower owned than Lawrence, lower owned than Torres. Not under. I mean, I have him at 31%. I prefer him. I think I have Armin Petrosian as the most over owned underdog on the slate,
even
plus
at
400 inside the distance. And what's his real path? What's his path to victory outside of? But what's his path to 100 points outside of a first round knockout? Right. I mean, because he's not
no grappling.
Right. There's no grappling. I mean, if anything, he doesn't want to get on the mat at all. So, you know, that I tweeted about. I tweeted about it just before. I said my luck, the optimal line is going to have Quinones and Petrosian, and I'm going to be minus 90%. But
I mean, it's leg kicks. I mean, that's the only way I see Armin really. Like, and what are you going to do? Throw one leg kick every, few seconds? Like, he's not going to get a million points. So,
well, the thing is that, like, how does he get 100? He gets 100 on the first round knockout, and I have him at 21% projected owned, and that's just too high.
Yeah, it's not going to. That's why I think I agree with you that Duncan is more so in play. And then there's the 2 value plays. You get the Vettori and the Bondar. I think the Bondar is the more interesting one out of all of it, because this guy is now a favorite after getting knocked out by Gordon.
He didn't get knocked out. Didn't he break his arm?
Broke his arm. Sorry. TKO. Knock.
Okay. He's been gone for 16 months. He comes out of the Ukrainian regional circuit.
And he wrestles.
We all know is the bastion of prospects. That's
Askarov.
Right. That's okay. Yeah. I mean, Bondar's most likely a fraud. Carlos Hernandez isn't good either. But if anyone's going to grapple, it's going to be Bondar. So, like, the line's flipped. You get some line value at 7,900. I'd rather people be scared. I mean, I think from a stylistic standpoint, Bondar has one of the highest ceilings for an underdog. I mean, just stylistically. Does he get to the point of his last fight, at 30 seconds, he's getting wobbled by Malcolm Gordon. So, like, that's not a good look. But he's been gone for 16 months. That can mean anything, right? Oh, my God, ring rust. Or it could mean that he got way better and trained and he's going to kill someone. So, high variance fight. Because I'm using less of Torres and Lawrence, and less of the main event, I'm naturally getting more Bondar, right? So, I mean, from a line value perspective, he is the underpriced fighter. He probably should, based on the new lines, he should be like 8,400. Not 7,900, but he's going to be owned. I mean, I have him at 33% projected owned. I have that as slightly under owned. I think his efficient ownership is around 38. So take it or leave it, but understand, like, this guy could be a fraud. Most likely is a fraud, and he could still be a fraud and still get 110 points and beat Carlos Hernandez.
Are you playing Carlos Hernandez?
I'm playing some of him. Yeah, I mean, I'm playing. I mean, dude,
some.
I have like 5 lineups with Joaquin Silva in it. So yeah, I have 70 lineups today.
So how? I mean, the thing is, at 8,300, he still could get a second round and almost not get
right. Plus 350 inside the distance. Good luck. You go take you in a style that is striking based. So like it's different than like Ronnie Lawrence plus 285. Yeah, but in a 3-round decision, he could score 120 based on his style. I just don't like taking strikers.
That you kind of nailed it earlier. I have a concern about Dan Argueta getting on top for a few seconds, then Ronnie Lawrence. That there is stallability in that fight inherently, and people are going to look at the game logs of Lawrence and say, "This is a smash play. Let's get him in." I was surprised earlier in the week he was lower owned. Now he's gotten a little bit of ownership, so I'm like, "Thank you." But I mean, is Argueta really going to be
I mean,
lower?
he has a ceiling. If he wins, he probably scores well. Yeah, okay, I get it.
But Argueta's probably like a low percentage submission, even off his back. Like he actually has some sharp, triangles and arm bars off his back. So like, I'm a little concerned he gets taken down and is comfortable on his back. That's a little bit of my concern.
To me, the interesting fight is another one at least is the Costa Flick fight.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on that.
Costa is I think Costa is more of a fraud than not. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's. I mean, he did decently against Albazi, but I don't think he's he's a prospect or anything. He's the second best inside the distance line, but that's because he's facing Jimmy Flick. But just understand, Jimmy Flick has a path to 100 points. It's just that I mean, he's the type very similar like Paul Craig, right?
Submission anytime.
He's losing the fight 98% of the way, and then all of a sudden wins with the arm triangle, guillotine, some submission off somewhere. Yep. So like that could happen at any time. But if it's not happening, I mean, Costa could just rack up points.
Jimmy Flick is one of those prototypical guys you can't have 0% of, even if he's like a plus 1,000 underdog. It's not, because he can always get a submission at any time.
Right, just like Oliveira last week. I mean, like Oliveira has
I don't want to hear it.
Right, just Oliveira he's scoring no fantasy points until he wins.
Oh, it's disgusting. I think we pretty much hit all the fights, right? I mean, there's under 2 minutes left, but yeah, what do you?
I want to answer a question from Phil Rolfe in the chat. How could you edit your lineups that are already entered with Lineup HQ? Just rerun them and just cut and paste them over the current lineups they have in the CSV.
Edit. You go to edit. What is it? Edit lineups
on the DraftKings screen. You go to edit lineups to get your lineups.
Edit entries. Yep.
Right. Edit entries, and you have all your entries there. Just paste over them. That's it.
Yeah. First fight of the night. I already know. It's one of these.
Well, I hope it's at least Pauga. I have more Pauga than Bukauskas.
Oh, it's so disgusting. It's like, well, Pauga actually could grapple or get those sneaky clinch points where he's clinching and maybe just like touching him a little bit of control time, right, Blender? You'd be happy with that?
I mean, I don't have much of either. So I mean, like, I'd rather I'd rather nothing happen.
I was waiting for you to say that you were on Bleda. Honestly, I thought all week Blender's going to say Bleda 9,500.
Well, she could destroy Fernandez. I get it. It's not being on Bleda. It's that Sarukian rates so well that it's just much more hard. It's harder to build Sarukian Bleda lineups than it is to build Sarukian with Fernandez at 6,700. It's like, okay, if I'm going to build based on my model, like the model says that Sarukian is worth way more than $300 compared to Bleda. So, like, well, my choice is to play Sarukian Fernandez. And if Sarukian rated out to be poor, then I'd be playing more of like Bleda Jimmy Flick or something and hoping for the best.
Yeah. I mean, I got to be honest. I played a hell of a lot of Jared Cannonier, and I'm terrified because I know how that ends. I know he just scores like 60 points.
Well, get a first-round knockout against the guy that's never been knocked out or knocked down.
Hey, I'll be the fluke. I'm happy with fluky stuff. Next week, though, Blender.
Early next week. We got an early show.
14 fights. ABC, noon.
It ain't going to be 14 fights, Mike. It ain't.
So what's it going to be? 12
I don't know, but it ain't going to be 14. It's never. It's 14 fights. I'm looking forward. You see me, Mr. Burns' hands going 14 fights, 14 fights. And then Thursday comes, it's 13 fights. Friday comes, so and Mrs. White, 12 fights. And then right after lock, they say, oh, we have bad news, right? And you get PTSD and some other fight. Now it's 11 fights, and you have 60% of the one fight that got canceled.
Yesterday?
Welcome to the UFC.
Yeah, yesterday we had a ton. PFL, Bellator. I'm waiting for it. Please, some fantasy site, let us have it. Put it all together. We need it. The product's
At
there.
least give us a PFL/Bellator card on. Now, Mike, I wouldn't mind it if they did PFL Bellator on Fridays on DraftKings.
I'm all in.
Let's get an extra MMA slate.
They even have deals with both of those promotions. Maybe not Bellator, but PFL they definitely have a deal with, and they could definitely do something for it.
Let's get
and next
Contender Series. Let's get Cage Warriors. Let's get BK or whatever FC or whatever.
You want like the tennis showdown slates now with the captain and assistant captain modes?
Why not?
I'm all over it for Contender Series. Let's try that out. That would be something. What are those Contender Series, like 4 fights, 5 fights?
Yeah, you can't really do it. Yeah, something else would also have to be on that day.
Yeah. Ugh, ugly. Well, we have an early show, like Bunder said, next week. And listen, I don't see anything crazy happening. Nothing's been canceled. Let's move on to the next week. We will see you guys.